One morning, while Dan was cooking breakfast, he was reading the business news on his phone when one of the articles grabbed his attention. It was about the company that he had recently made a deal with, so he clicked on it to read more about it. It turned out that the company had declared bankruptcy, and that meant that Dan was in big trouble. Dan had to take over the family business, and over the years, Dan had put in the effort and climbed through the ranks. Despite being young, Dan had the experience and skill to do the job. His father, who was running the business, would not have it any other way. He demanded the best from everyone, and most especially his own son. But despite his efforts, Dan could never please his dad, and this made him feel he wasn't cut out for the job. Dan became sad as he recalled his dad's stinging remarks. It wasn't the first time his dad had been so strict with him for a simple mistake. But he was right, Dan thought as the words of his dad played over and over in his mind. Dan just blinked and kept staring at the document in front of him. How could he miss it, he thought. Although he felt like quitting, Dan knew he would only be confirming his dad's belief about him if he did that. Dan's father had started the company back when he was a little younger than Dan, and despite coming from nothing, through persistent effort and sheer will, he built his company into a very successful brand with many renowned clients. Dan's father had carved a niche for himself by demanding the very best from himself and everyone he worked with. He refused to take no for an answer. He had introduced his son to the family business from an early age and had patiently groomed him to one day take over as the head of the company. But while his father believed he was preparing him for the future, Dan was discouraged and felt like a failure. One day, Dan came to work early as usual and was just about to start his day when he got a call. It was his dad. "Come over to my office," he said, and ended the call. Dan didn't know what to expect. It wasn't the first time he had been summoned like this, and it was never good. As he walked to his father's office, Dan thought, it couldn't be about the project. The deadline wasn't for 2 weeks. Dan's father stared at the computer screen in front of him. He thought he had more time, but the doctor said he needs to start his treatment as soon as possible. He wondered if his son was ready. He felt he still had a lot to learn, but there was no more time. When Dan got to the office, his father told him he would be taking over the affairs of the company. Dan asked what he would be doing, and his dad told him that he had been diagnosed with a rare disease and was to start his treatment immediately. Dan was so sad, and he understood why his dad looked so worried. 6 months? That was a long time. Back in his office, Dan kept thinking this was it. He had to prove himself. He recalled the look on his father's face and knew he couldn't disappoint him. But Dan doubted himself. As the new boss, Dan prepared all night for his first meeting with the department heads. But despite preparing so hard, his meeting didn't go too well. Dan felt overwhelmed. He knew what should be said and done because he had seen his father do it so many times, but he couldn't bring himself to do the same. News quickly spread around. The new boss wasn't up to it. He was going to fail. Dan could see the side glances when he walked past his employees. On his way home, Dan kept thinking of what to do. He had to redeem his image, and since he didn't have any particular leadership strategy, Dan came up with a plan. His plan was to become likable, an exact opposite of who his dad is. So the next day, Dan spoke to some of his employees who had been with the company for a long time. It turned out he was right. They were equally scared of the old man. And with that, Dan decided to put his plan to action. Dan had a meeting with his department heads about the changes they would like to see in the workplace. After the meeting, Dan considered each suggestion that was given, and later that day after he got home, Dan sent an email to his employees stating the new conditions around the workplace. A few weeks later, Dan saw the changes around him. He noticed his employees seemed happier, but while that happened, Dan also noticed their change in attitude towards work. They'd become easygoing in their duties, and almost everyone started to miss deadlines to complete their projects. This all compounded together, and within a month, the company's performance indicators had fallen more than ever before. Dan realized he had made a bad decision, and he needed to quickly come up with a backup plan to fix the situation. Company's KPIs were bad, and that meant that at the end of the quarter, business would not meet the planned sales figures. Around that time, Dan was presented with a deal by one of the managers that promised massive profits if it worked out. Dan looked at the proposal, and although it was not fully legal, the manager convinced him that the outcome was worth the risk. And being desperate, Dan agreed to the deal. "My father must never find out about this deal," he thought to himself. One morning, while Dan was cooking breakfast, he was reading the business news on his phone when one of the articles grabbed his attention. It was about the company he had recently made a deal with, so he clicked on it to read more about it. It turned out that the company had declared bankruptcy, and that meant that Dan was in big trouble. He immediately drove to the office and spoke with the manager who proposed the deal, and they agreed that they should pull out of the deal. Dan tried to contact the decision makers from the other company, but nobody would pick up the phone. Dan spoke with his lawyer, but after looking over the agreement, there was nothing that could be done to get the invested money back. It was hard to digest, but eventually Dan had to accept the fact that he had lost a huge amount of the company's money. He felt at the beginning of the deal that it was a bad idea, but his indecisiveness led to this disaster. Dan had not only failed his dad and his employees, but himself as well. After the incident, Dan decided to talk to someone, and after thinking it over, he realized his dad was the best person to talk to. Dan summoned up the courage and called his dad. He told him about what happened and how he felt about running the company. His dad listened attentively and then encouraged him to believe in himself and stop doubting himself. After the call, Dan was surprised. He had nearly lost the company, but his dad didn't react as he expected he would. The next day, Dan kept thinking about what his dad had said. It wasn't very helpful, he thought. He wasn't sure of what he wanted to hear, but it wasn't some talk about self-belief. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Dan thought back to when he almost lost the company. Knowing that everything was on the line, he didn't doubt himself for once and had swiftly taken action. Since then, Dan had noticed some changes around the workplace, and managers and other employees took him more seriously. Dan slowly realized he was the cause of his problems all along. He had always believed he wasn't good enough, but that wasn't true. That night, Dan read about the power of belief and how positive affirmations can help change negative beliefs. It seemed strange, but he decided to give it a try. So every morning after taking his bath, Dan would look at himself in the mirror and recite his daily affirmations. It made him feel good about himself, but apart from that, Dan didn't see any changes. Until one day, he was approached by one of his managers who spoke about his recent attitude and how inspiring it was. Dan was surprised. He hadn't seen any changes because he still struggled with running the business, but it was clear his attitude and composure had changed. From then on, Dan's confidence grew day by day, and gradually, Dan overcame the negative beliefs that prevented him from being his best. By the end of the second quarter, the company had made a good profit under Dan's leadership, making up for the losses he incurred. This earned him the respect of his dad and employees as well. It turned out, Dan had it in him after all. He only had to believe in himself.